Long enough to cover the subject and short enough to keep it interesting. Welcome to Outta My League. I'm Nick Diaz. So I promised you in my previous episode that I would not talk about who the next football coach for LSU would be because it's way too early for that shit. Can we just wait? It's one game. It doesn't look great. I'm going to give you a bad prediction of what I think's going to happen, but let's just wait. Having said that, so let's look at the schedule going forward for LSU. LSU's over-under, according to Vegas, was 8.5 wins, I believe. Most people around Baton Rouge who were realistic had 9-3. Some had even 10-2 as a possibility. I was one of them. But looking at the schedule, let's see where the wins are, because I think if Ed Orgeron goes 8-4, Scott Woodward is firing him. Matter of fact, I have it on good accord that he's looking for a way to get him out if he doesn't get at least 9 wins this season. So looking at the schedule, let's find where the wins are, if you can actually get to 9-3. Because it is realistic to get to 9-3, but where are those 9 wins going to come from? So McNeese State, Central Michigan, ULM. Let's just count those as wins. So that's 3. You got 3 wins right there. Then at Mississippi State, Auburn, at Kentucky are your next 3 games after the Central Michigan game. Everyone thinks that the season's going to rely on that Auburn game, and it's understandable. But Mississippi State, while they look like utter shit against Louisiana Tech, I actually think that's going to be the bigger game that decides how the rest of the season is going to go for Ed Orgeron and LSU. The game plan against Mississippi State last year was putrid. Run man, blitz, all that other stuff. Don't defend the crossing patterns, which they still don't know how to defend. And Mississippi State looked like crap the rest of the season, couldn't score on hardly anybody. And the same thing happened against Louisiana Tech last week. Well, here's the thing. If they look at their mistakes from last year, and they go into that Mississippi State game, LSU does, and they run similar to the same game plan that they ran last year, there is no hope for this team. None whatsoever. Having said that, I think LSU beats Mississippi State because I can't fathom why the hell LSU would not run a different game plan than what they did last season. So I think they beat at Mississippi State, so that's 4 wins. At Auburn, Auburn's at home. If Charbonnet for UCLA tore you up on the ground in your run defense, then what the hell is Tank Bigsby for Auburn going to do? Now, I understand Auburn hasn't beaten LSU at home since 1999, but I'm sorry, based on today's week 1 evaluation, I don't trust the fact that they can stop Tank Bigsby any better than they stopped Charbonnet for UCLA. At Kentucky struggled against ULM, which might be the worst roster, worst group of 5 school in all of Division I. I think there's an argument for that. I'm not really too concerned about Kentucky because their offense is very NFL-centric. Run the ball, play defense. I think LSU can win that game. All right, so that's 5 wins. Let's say that's 5 wins. Florida at home. I think LSU has a better chance to beat Florida at home than they do at Ole Miss or even home against Texas A&M. But again, as of right now, week 1 evaluation, I'm going to say Florida wins that game because you know they're looking for revenge. At Ole Miss. Ole Miss might win 10 games this season. Being serious. Again, week 1 evaluation. Ole Miss, their defense is very similar in style and scheme and aggression to what UCLA was. And you know Lane Kiffin can call plays. Yeah, I'm going to say LSU loses that one. So you still have 5 wins. At Alabama, no, that's not happening. Arkansas struggled for 3.5 quarters against Rice. And you get them at home. All right, so that's 6 wins. All right, so you got 6 wins. You counted the ULM win, which is right after Arkansas. That's 6 wins for LSU. Texas A&M. So if you're at 6-5, I understand why people would panic, but listen to this. If you would have told me last year after that Missouri game that LSU was going to go on the road to beat Florida and then beat Ole Miss at home the next week, I would have told you were crazy. So will they pull a rabbit out of their hat? Maybe. Yeah. The team chemistry we've been told is better. But I don't know. Texas A&M, they struggled. That could be a swing game, but at the end of the day, no, I don't trust that offensive line to score against that defense. And I can't imagine why Jimbo Fisher would struggle the exact same way against last year's LSU defense 2 years in a row. I just can't see that. So, best case scenario, LSU 7-5. I mean, that as of right now, that's what I have, 7-5. So that's 6 wins that I feel pretty good about after week 1. And one of those games, Auburn, Florida, or even A&M, or possibly Ole Miss, they're going to pull a rabbit out of their hat and just find a way to just play over their heads. One team screws up, throws a shoe, whatever, and LSU gets out of there with a victory. And if that happens, 7-5, then yeah, Coach O's getting fired. Now, I will say this. Based on what I heard Matt Flynn say this morning, and I agree with Matt Flynn, not that I know more about football than Matt Flynn does, but it makes perfect sense. LSU, their problems on offense schematically and adjustments are fixable because a lot of it is just the over-preparation for a first-time coordinator. First-time coordinator, they feel like they have to do too much, and really that simplification is actually the best way to go. And you could see that's what Pete's probably did going into the UCLA game, and that's what Matt Flynn's evaluation of it was, that actually doing less can actually help them do more going forward. The offensive line is the offensive line. But in today's college football, sure, you still have to be able to run the ball, especially in the SEC, but having a prolific passing attack can still win you some games. The defense, I don't have any faith, quite honestly, in it being fixed, simply because it's all based on aggression and technique, none of which I saw. Poor technique, poor physicality. You can't set the edge. You can't, have basic eye discipline. That's kind of stuff you can't. Tackling, you can't fix that in the middle of the year. You just can't. And that's where I think LSU's screwed. Once again, you're in trouble when the head coach, whose specialty is supposed to be defense, and yet the defense is bad again for the second year in a row, and specifically on the defensive line when it comes to run stopping. That's a problem when your head coach is the defensive line coach. I said this in the previous episode 2 days ago. When the head coach's specialty is failing, the head coach will probably eventually be fired. Eventually. Jim Harbaugh's been on the hot seat. He won't get fired because he's a Michigan man and their whole shit up there. What's his position? Quarterback. Played quarterback, coached quarterback. Well, what's been the problem at Michigan? Finding a quarterback. Will Muschamp at Florida and South Carolina. Will Muschamp is a defensive guy. Played defense, coached defense. Well, what was the problem at the tail end at Florida and South Carolina? His defense wasn't good. Another Florida coach, Jim McElwain. He was known as an offensive guy, quarterback guy. What was the problem at his last year at Florida? The offense started to suck, and he bailed. There are some warning signs here with Coach O. And the one thing that I think is less fixable is the one position that he coaches and the side of the ball that he specializes in, and he can't get it done. I'm not confident, but that's just me. Thanks for listening to Out of My League. If you like what you heard, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, or follow me on Twitter and Facebook in the description link below.